All right, welcome everyone. This workshop is on how to coach somatics and flow state, and with a reference to Kinesiolyoga and Steel Mace Vinyasa explained. And today's people that are tuning into this range from body workers to physical trainers to just everyday students that really want to understand the intersection between somatics and flow state. So before we get into that, I'd love to share with you guys my backstory of how I started getting curious about this buzzword somatics that I'd been hearing in the fitness industry. So as you all probably know, I've been teaching clubs and steel mace for a long time. My entire professional career has been a personal trainer in yoga, and I've hybridized the two. I love teaching seminars, and I taught at the embodiment conference earlier on in pandemic, which was really awesome. And there was a ton of coaches teaching and integrating this term somatics, and I started getting more and more curious about it at that time. And oopsie. Sorry, I'm trying to let people in here as they come in. So I started getting more curious about it, and I started enrolling myself into a somatics therapy program. So I started working with a specialist that's trained in Wilhelm Reich's work. Raise your hand, quick show of hands if you're familiar with Wilhelm Reich or Reichen therapy. Cool. So definitely reference that as a resource for somatic therapy. I'm trying to admit more people in, but I guess they're just automatically coming in here. Sweet. So I wanted to start changing on a deeper level, both in my business and in my personal relationships. And so I figured going into a somatic therapy program would be a really good kickoff point. And then I realized I had a lot of tools at my disposal already. And so I started integrating that into my teacher training curriculum. And it's been phenomenal just seeing how it lands in the physical realm. So excited to share that with you guys today. We'll go into a bit about that. So some other good resources, if you haven't read the book called Body Mind, please write that down. It's a really great resource that breaks down Reichian work, somatic therapy, as well as Rolfing, and kind of ties those all together and really dissects the body into different components. And we'll talk a bit about that. We'll kind of brush over that today. It's only an hour workshop, so I want to give you guys a springboard for doing your own research. And I highly encourage anyone that's wanting to go deeper into somatics, working with a professional or working with a cohort that is really specializing in that and giving you support can really help guide you and keep you accountable for understanding this knowledge in a deeper way. So somatics is a really broad term, and it can mean many things. So one way that I've seen somatics or somatic cueing used in the fitness and movement industry is it means that we're using tactile and sensation cueing to describe how something feels in the soma or the body mind. So I'll say that again. It means using tactile or sensation cueing to describe how something feels in the soma or in the body mind. So the mind and body are inextricably linked. And as you know, the movement practice can really invoke a lot of emotions, and we'll go into why those emotions start to come out in the movement practice as well. Some examples of somatic cueing are restricted, expansive, spacious, warm, cold, numb, tight, bound, light, airy, free. These would all be words used to describe somatic sensations in the body. Versus internal and external cueing. So if I'm cueing something internally from a coaching standpoint, I might be cueing someone to activate their deep inner core, or I'm cueing them some musculature that they should contract or co-contract. That would be an example of internal cueing. And that's assuming that they have knowledge of anatomy, or they actually know what muscles I'm even referencing. Or if I can use the layman's term for internal cueing, meaning draw my navel to spine, or thank you so much, Renaissance. I need a little water. Got a frog in my throat here. So you can use layman's terms and also achieve that internal cueing. External cueing is generally giving someone something that's task oriented. So using other directional cues that exist in the room. So for example, the right wall, the left wall, the ceiling, the ground, the block, something to press against a rope or a strap, something to create torque against a mace. Where is the mace globe going relative to its starting position in space? And how am I using external cues so that they can achieve a task? Somatic cueing comes into play when asking people about their internal experience. So they're different. We've got our internal cueing, anatomy, activating within one's body. We've got our external cueing, which is task-oriented, something outside the body. And then we have our somatic internal experience of how do our energetic centers feel from the inside. So I use this often in our Steel Mace Vinyasa 100-hour teacher training, which you guys all got the opportunity to either apply for, fill out a form, chat about it with you or with the team. If that is something that interests you, I highly, highly encourage just having a conversation and seeing what's possible there. But we use this as a framework for seeing where our energetic blockages are. And what I've noticed is sometimes people have a numbness in their energetic centers where they actually can't even feel what's happening in those regions due to what Reich calls armoring. I'm gonna have Rue go ahead and mute their screen, Rue, or I'll just mute it for you. Cool. So as the fascia starts to get bound, that tends to lead to the sensory motor amnesia associated with having this thickened fascia. And those of you in the bodywork field, I'm sure that you are well versed in this. But this can be just something that allows you to coach your clients on a deeper level. So we do in our movement intake, we do a full, chakra up down orientation of which energetic centers feel most strong, which are most blocked. And we kind of go from there and we reverse engineer our program design based on what is discovered in that full intake. It's an hour-long intake as well. If you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat bar as they come up, or you can save them for the Q&A later on as well. So Rolfing and Bodywork is a modality to release emotions through myofascial manipulation. You can also perform a lot of this myofascial manipulation on your own using open and closed chain mobility drills, parasympathetic breathing. RAD rolling is a really awesome tool. Julie is here, who is one of our RAD Roller colleagues out of RAD Roller headquarters. And we teach our clients, we empower them to actually be able to do a lot of their myofascial release work on their own as well. So as an experiment, I want everyone to do this with each other. So imagine you're very nervous and upset. And with this feeling, allow the responses to happen in your belly and chest. So take a moment, you can close your eyes, just give yourself that imaginative exercise of feeling really nervous and upset. And then start to map the somatic sensations that arise with you imagining or putting yourself in that emotional environment. Now imagine that you did this for a few minutes each day. And after months and years of this, your belly and chest would begin to shape in a reflection of this state of nervousness with the blocks and tension. So for an individual that has chronic nervousness, stress, anxiety, even depression, over time, the body starts to shape into the form of what that the characteristics of that emotional response are. Let's do another experiment. Now imagine you're very unhappy and depressed and allow yourself to assume the posture that would embody those feelings. If standing up is helpful for you to go into that just imaginative moment. So notice where that hits you differently in your energetic centers. And energetic centers from a non-dogmatic viewpoint, we're speaking about in yoga, they call them the chakras. In cadaver studies, we could find them as 7 points of concentrated nerve ganglia located from the base of the spine to the crown of the head. So just a quick frame of reference for those of you that aren't familiar with chakras, we have our root energetic center, which is concentrated nerve ganglia at the base of the spine. We've got our sacral region. I'm 5.5 months pregnant, so my sacral region's getting a little squished here. So that's where our reproductive organs lie. Highly associated with emotional relationships, sexuality, creativity, intimacy. We've got our solar plexus. So this would be associated with the digestive tract and all the internal organs. And emotional components would be discipline, willpower, motivation, drive. The heart energetic center here, associated with our internal and interpersonal relationships and also our self-care practices in relationship with ourself. We've got our throat energetic center. Definitely associated with the neck and the voice and the vocal cords and how we project our voice. We've got our third eye, the space here, which is highly correlated with the prefrontal cortex. This is one of the areas of the brain that's activated when the inner critic is really turned on, or we're in our analytical thinking mode. We've got our crown energetic center, which is associated with the higher functioning centers of the brain and the pineal gland, which is our connection to universal consciousness. So definitely get to know your energetic centers from both I guess a historical context as it pertains to yoga. Anodea Judith is a really great resource for learning the energetic centers. And from a non-dogmatic viewpoint as well, just looking at what organs are associated with those regions. And for all of you guys here, if you could just place your right hand on the area that feels the most unbound, the most light, the most airy and energized, put a hand there. And then put a left hand on the area that's feeling most blocked, energetically bound, restricted, heavy. And just take a moment to breathe evenly into both of those zones. So starting with the zone that's most charged up, breathe into that space. Pause for a brief moment, and then exhale through the nose. We'll do this about 5 times, just bringing awareness to your most charged up energetic center and your most blocked or heavy. Deep inhale through the nose. And deep exhale. And about 4 more times. I want you to pay attention to the pause between inhalation and exhalation. This is a really key point. You can close your eyes, feel the heaviness, feel the gravity in your body with eyes closed. One of the most helpful somatic cues that I can give to my clients, my students, is getting heavy and surrendering to gravity. When we're in an activated and charged up state, we're elevated, we're kind of flying off our seats. When we're heavy and grounded and we surrender to gravity, we can feel the heaviness in our fascia and our musculoskeletal system. This triggers us to get into parasympathetic. Take a couple more rounds of breath and really focus on that pause between the inhale. We call this the kumbhaka in Sanskrit. And from a scientific lens, we're just triggering a deeper exhalation and triggering parasympathetic nervous system to come online. And then slowly open your eyes and just write down what shifted in the area that felt most bound. What did it start at, like feeling? What were this, if you could put like 2 to 3 words of sensations, somatic sensations, describing them. What was it before those 5 breaths? And how did it shift or change in a simple 5 to 6 breath experiment and allowing yourself to feel heavy? Another way for folks to get more in their bodies is to slow down. So to actually talk slower, to hold eye gaze. This is related to polyvagal theory, is being able to connect with the eyes, the mouth, all the little nuances of the face. So as a practice with your clients and with the people that you're interacting with, you can start to hold eye gaze longer, slow your words down. Notice if your words are coming from your chest, heightened state or fight or flight state, or if they're coming from your belly or some combination of heart and belly. So really getting grounded in how you're speaking and the tones in which you're speaking. Emotional stimulation of muscles and fascia can have the same effect on the body as physical activity, except it's often difficult to detect the original source of the stimulation. It's often unconscious. So when somebody gets injured, it's really easy for us to identify, oh, they got injured because they were skiing and there was a shear force on their knee and that's why their knee's out of whack. When somebody has an energetic blockage or a somatic blockage in their fascia, that generally is due to some emotional pattern or emotion that's been present for a long duration of time. And it's really hard to pinpoint that moment when it set in. So one thing that I like to do for my students is help them just identify one pattern and then trace it back. When was the first time you started feeling or having that emotional pattern show up in your life? So for you guys that are taking notes at home, let's do a little experiment. Call this the 3 Ps. This we'll get to later on in the workshop. Identify an emotional pattern that's no longer serving you, or something that's been present for you for a long time, something that you're wanting to shift. Some examples: procrastination, not charging, not knowing our self-value, or lack of self-value, lack of self-worth. So undercharging, giving too much for free, for example. Other examples would be holding things too tightly, like having control, being a control freak, or controlling every aspect of your partner's life or your life. There's many examples of emotional patterns, but identify one that's been holding you back. And my personal pattern for myself, I realized the reason I got into somatic therapy work was that I realized I had been discounting my online courses for years. And I had, every time I'd launch it, it'd be like the launch would be half off. And then I'd have like a 40% off for like the remainder of time. And I was like, okay, how many areas in my life am I leaking power where I'm giving things away for free too much, or discounting my services, or not showing up in the ways that I want to show up? And then I realized, why have I not been able to attract a partner that really values me? And I saw the correlation. I was like, whoa, it's showing up in my life, in my business world, where I'm giving with poor boundaries in some areas, and just giving and not protecting my time. And then I realized I was attracting partners as well that were not seeing the true value of what I'm worth. And so literally within a few months of doing somatic coaching, I was able to break a lot of those patterns, shift a lot of things in my business, and then start to attract my ideal mate. And now I have a mate it's been a good friend of mine, and we're building a cabin together on our property. And we've been actually living on the same property for 2.5 years. So a lot of things can shift when you give yourself the opportunity or the container to actually make those shifts and look at the shadow sides of things that you really want to change in your life. So if anyone wants to put in their pattern in the chat bar, feel free. You can just make it succinct, let go of the story, and just be really like a declaration, like this is the pattern that I want to change, or that I want to look deeper into. Feel free to write it in. No worries if you don't want to. You can also just write in your journal. And then for you guys at home, the exercise is, how many areas in your life is this pattern showing up? How many areas in your life is this showing up on a business level, a personal level, and a relationship level? So I'm really big on gathering objective feedback. As anyone that's worked with me in a coaching setting knows, it's all about tracking. If we don't track it, how can we determine success? How can we have benchmarks to know where we're at baseline and where we want to go? So for you, identifying and seeing all the areas that it happens, or that it shows up in your business, professional, personal, relationships, in inner world life, like identify those areas, write it down. When you put pen to paper, something shifts in the subconscious mind where you're bringing more awareness to the behavior. Step one of making change. If it just lives in our head and we keep beating ourselves up about it, or it keeps becoming more and more unconscious, we don't have the tools to actually shift and change it. So once you've identified where it's happening, how many areas of your life it's happening in, the second piece is to now track, how long has this been a pattern? When did it first set on? Or can you remember the first time that you started initiating that emotional pattern? And write it down. When was the very first time that you started having that internal belief, that fear, or self-limiting belief, or whatever that emotional pattern is? So now we have a duration of, we know that this has been 5 years, 10 years, it happened at this particular trauma event potentially, or this has been happening since childhood, or this has been happening since early college. We know how long like this problem has been happening in the mental body, the mind body. And the next piece is identifying, how does it feel somatically when you go into that pattern? So going back to those sensation cues in all those energetic centers, does it hit you in your chest? Does it feel tight? Does it feel heavy? Does it feel like you're getting the wind knocked out of you in your belly? Does your throat feel constricted? Map it to an area in your somatic body first, and we'll just stick with that for now. We'll come back to that later on because I don't want to give away all the 3 Ps quite yet. So for now, just creating awareness. We've got some objective feedback on it. We know what it feels like. We know sensations. Did you know that there's increasing evidence that our feelings and attitudes very directly affect the way we hold ourselves, move, breathe, and grow? So later on, we'll go into how has this impacted our posture, but for now, you could just make a couple notes. How has this affected the way that you hold yourself, the way that you move, the way that you breathe, and your personal growth? Has it been limiting you in any areas? We mold ourselves with selective emotional activity and experience. So our bodies start to take on the shape of the patterns, the emotional patterns that we embody the most. So in an examination of thousands of Rolfing sessions, similar stories came up when similar parts of the body are confronted. For example, if you want to write this down, the chest, common, after observing thousands of Rolfings, the common theme with the chest, feelings and memories of being left and neglected come up when the chest is released. So feelings of being left and neglected, or heartache, heartbroken can also be associated with that as well. Upper back, strong feelings of rage and anger when Rolfing the back or when releasing in a Rolfing session for the upper back. The jaws, Rolf jaws release sadness. Shoulders tell the stories of burdens and stressful responsibilities. So having the weight of the world on your shoulders. If anyone has a mirror handy, this is a fun exercise in Somatics. You can also do this later on if you have a mirror. So the exercise is in placing the mirror over one eye and looking at that eye, and then describing and mapping out what story that eye is telling. Is that eye scared? Is that eye sad? What are the nuances in that one eyeball? And then looking at the other one. And sometimes the right and left sides will have totally different stories. Like one will be a really sad eye and one's like really heightened and alert and really stressed. And you can literally see the nuances between the right and left sides. Generally with a round of parasympathetic breathing, which I will walk you through a great somatic exercise for getting into parasympathetic, which includes eye stretching in all directions. Generally, if you take the mirror and you observe the eyes prior to doing the breathing exercise and after, you will see a change and you'll see your more true self come through after implementing the breathing exercise. So we will do that very soon here. Okay. So second element to consider in somatics is trauma and somatic experiencing. Have you guys heard of Peter Levine? Quick show of hands for those that have read or studied Peter Levine's work. Okay. He has an approach in somatic experiencing. He's groundbreaking and takes a bottom-up approach, starting with the feet, root, pelvis, all the way up to the head. He advocates for a step-by-step process in helping clients safely release the traumatic stress that interferes with their ability to engage in therapy. I know a lot of us are not therapists, we're movement practitioners or movement educators, but the body and mind are inextricably linked. So if we can build our toolbox and start to weave this knowledge of trauma and releasing energetic blockages through the movement practice, we have broadened our toolbox to be able to give people the tools and the education to do a lot of this stuff themselves. And when they become autonomous, as we know, teach a man to fish, they're going to be able to serve themselves on a deeper level because they can access it on their own. They're not reliant on you. And then you can start doing the deeper work with them as well. Other things that Peter Levine recommends: simple interventions based on movement, images, breathing, and vocalizations for creating new experiences in the body that displace negative emotions such as shame, powerlessness, and self-esteem. So verbal affirmations is a great exercise for helping people really start to embody that change. So the body is hardwired for truth. So when you speak a thing and your voice falters and you have this kind of hesitancy in your voice, you can tell that you don't believe it. And so the practice in using different vocal exercises for affirmation is to get that affirmation. So let's say you have a mantra. I just met with one of our students and she had a really awesome mantra. We were speaking it out loud. You know who you are. speaking it from the belly, and then holding eye contact, and then listening to the tone and inflection. And it might take a few times. You might need to do a parasympathetic breathing exercise to get you to a point where you actually feel it in your body and you actually start to resonate with it on a cellular level. One somatic exercise that I did recently was identifying a fear, where my therapist would have me rotate my head one way, so I wasn't looking at him, rotate it, and then say the thing that I was afraid of. And he was like, you didn't really feel like you believed it. You sound like you're laughing at it. And then he had me like rotate my head the other way and say it. And he's like, yeah, it didn't really seem like you actually believe that fear. So does it make sense to keep having that fear in your body? So using your voice as a way to kind of detect how true it is to you or is for you. And then if you want to counteract it with the actual truth, so you can do a right and left on both sides. The thing that you're afraid of, speak it out loud, listen. Is that coming off with inflections of feeling like you don't believe it, like you're laughing or nervous when you say it? And then speak the truth, the thing that you really hope to embody, or the actual truth. And notice how much more calm in your body, how much more grounded you feel when you speak the truth thought. So just some ideas for starting to play with somatic vocal exercises. Another one Peter Levine references is how to read the body's clues to identify an underlying emotional state. So have you ever seen someone talking to you just with their hands like this, or touching their mouth a lot, or looking away, or looking up or rolling their eyes or closing the eyes is a sign of the limbic system being slightly off. Arms crossed is protection. There's a million little somatic cues that are nonverbal cues that we can take into account with our clients and also even with ourselves, like even how you're showing up to the screen. A lot of us have our screens off. I invite you guys to turn them on if you want to. But just how you absorb information, how's your posture, how's your breathing, how's your energy? Like do a little check-in. So how to read the body's clues and identifying the underlying emotional state. Strategies for helping people access and release suppressed emotion in controlled and empowering ways. Proven exercises that help clients connect with their bodies and gain confidence from the physical experiences of power, mastery, and independent agency. So again, this is exactly what we teach in our 100-hour Steel Mace Vinyasa curriculum, is how to gain mastery of your movement and master your vessel so that you understand on an energetic level what's happening, and you know how to reverse engineer your patterns, emotional patterns, through posture and power leakages. Those are the 3 Ps that we work with. Tools for working with clients who can't access memories of a traumatic event or who shut down when it comes to talking about intense emotion. So sometimes when there's been an extreme trauma of sorts, it can cause you to completely numb it out, black it out, completely not have any memory or recollection of that time in your life or that memory as a protection mechanism. So definitely recommend, if you haven't been getting into audiobooks on somatics, definitely recommend Releasing Trauma by Peter Levine. Somatic Coaching is another one that I've recently checked out. The Body Mind book, I don't think they have it on audio, but just getting more information from the experts who have compiled that, and just knowing that they're speaking to from a therapeutic lens. And the steel mace is a very ancient tool, but it's been only recently used in the last 5 to 10 years where it's even become popular. So what I'm finding as I train people with steel mace is that they're starting to do vocal exercises in the class, power breath, vocalizing their sound, doing different vocalizing movements and exercises to bring about that sensation of warrior archetype. I'm seeing people's posture shift out of the arms crossed, caving in shoulders posture into embodying the warrior archetype, and freeing up a lot of blockages, like where they didn't even know they were numb in certain areas that they didn't know how to activate, or they didn't know how to call upon the musculature. They didn't even know these muscles exist. So it's a tool for helping people reconnect with themselves on an energetic level and a physical level. And then the missing piece is the somatics level as well. So how this all relates to a steel mace practice, I'll just cover a few things. If you haven't trained with us at Flowshala Virtual, we have a ton of different programs. We do it, everything's virtual. We've got online offerings through Zoom. There's recordings. Just check out the website, get in touch if you have questions. But all of these theories and systems are interwoven into all of our programs. So how this relates to Steel Mace Vinyasa practice, firstly, the power breath. So if you want to try that out with me, the power breath is a sharp exhalation on the concentric portion of yielding the mace. I should probably grab a mace. One sec. I'm gonna grab my tiny little 5. Okay, so obviously I'm not super dressed for doing steel mace workouts. So if I was doing a shoulder cast, for example, I would inhale, and then on the weight bearing portion, the casting portion, that's when I would exhale. So we call that the power breath. If somebody was new to training and they were deconditioned, we would give them force level breath, which is below that. Force level breath is breathing out in both the concentric and the eccentric. Flow level breath is switching the order. So instead of breathing out on the work phase, we would actually breathe out on the eccentric phase. And there's mastery level of breath. So anyone that's into performance or circus arts or any sort of dance performance, you might know that when you go into mastery level of breath, the exercise breathes you, and you're not making the sharp exhalation, but instead you are conserving your energy for the performance, and you're breathing when you need to breathe. So you look like your face is relaxed, you look like you're in more of a parasympathetic state. So the power breath has 5 levels. Fear reactive breath is at the bottom. If you want to write this down, feel free. We cover this in the teacher training. Fear reactive breath, that's when you're bracing and bearing down and holding your breath. The next progression up is force level breath, which I just demonstrated. Force level breath is breathing out on both the concentric as well as the eccentric phase of work. So if I'm doing a quad press, it's breathing out on the way down and the way up. If I'm doing a squat, it's breathing out on the way down and the way up. That's force level breath. For people that have blockages in their throat energetic center and blockages in their solar plexus, can you see how implementing and teaching that force level breath is an exercise to start stimulating the nerve ganglia in those regions that are formerly blocked? So it's a stepping stone and a regression for somebody that has a fear of even breathing and making noise. Like I've had many clients feel very uncomfortable when they first start to learn the breathing techniques. And maybe there was something along the line, someone that told them that it sounded funny to breathe, or they shouldn't be loud, or they need to be quiet. But the force level breath is the first stepping stone to getting someone to master level breath. Next level would be the power breath. So that's like the middle range. We've got 5 levels of breath. The middle range is the power breath, breathing out on the concentric phase, and the inhale is automatic. You don't have to worry about the inhale, it's just going to happen. Flow level breath, we switch that up. So instead of breathing out forcefully on the concentric or weight bearing phase, we then breathe out on the eccentric phase. So when the muscle is elongated, breathe out there, and then we inhale on the concentric phase. That's flow level breath. And that takes a while to get to. Generally, clients are training with us for 8 months to a year before they're able to flip that. And it's economy of energy. So it actually, when you switch over into flow level breathing, you're generally standing or you're in a state of extension upon the inhalation. So for example, if I was doing a swing, like a single-handed swing with my mace, if I breathe out on the swing, I inhale on the stand. So it's basically training a deeper inhalation upon the concentric load, and you get more oxygen to the brain, so it can be really exhilarating to get into that flow level breath. And it's the next level of training your lungs in that capacity to switch that up mentally, and then mastery level breath. Mindset coaching. So another way this whole somatics and trauma, somatic experiencing relates to the flow shala practices are integrating mindset coaching into the physical training curriculum, because the two are not separate. And so we've been pioneering this movement in mindset coaching for the past 3 years since we opened the Flow Shala studio. And we started with a 6 weeks to flow program. And so our signature program, we've taken 500 plus people through as their entry, kind of like their entry into our studio is our a program that was originally geared towards people that wanted to lose weight, and they had to train 3 times a week for 6 weeks. They had to hit those 3 workouts. They paid like $600 to do this program. If they lost the weight, they hit their 3 workouts a week, and they did all of their online mindset coaching content, then we actually gave them their money back. So we rewarded over $50,000 in refunds because our program was highly effective. And I'll tell you why it was. Because we had the mindset piece. They had to meditate every day. They had to go through the energetic centers. They had 1 energetic center video to watch every week, focus on the chakras, starting with the root all the way up. They had to hit their 3 workouts a week, and they had to train on the 4-day wave. So what we found, 1, people are highly motivated by financial incentive. So we learned a lot from that program, and since then we no longer do that program. It was really awesome for the starting point, but we found that people that were motivated by external rewards ended up doing the program, losing 20 pounds, and then taking the money and then leaving the studio and never coming back, and they gained the weight back. The people that stayed as long-term members started creating it as a lifestyle. They lost, people that came in for weight loss lost 40 to 50 to 60 pounds over the long term because they learned the lifestyle tools of implementing this on the long term, and they got more connected with their energetic centers through mindset coaching. So other ways that this relates, identifying emotional patterns that no longer serve you. So bringing that into your movement practice. Every time you come to practice, it's an opportunity to shift those emotional patterns that are landing somewhere physically in your body. Using the workouts to reverse engineer the desired emotional pattern, learning the 3 Ps, patterns, posture, power leakages, or power. Training neural load, this is a good one. So I'll go into a little depth on the neural load concept here. So training neural load is completing the neural pathway for fighting or protection. So generally when somebody endures a trauma, you have the opportunity to either fight, flight, flee, fight or flight, or freeze. So when the trauma happens and you don't get the opportunity to express that fighting or fleeing component, and we just suppress the emotion, that's when the trauma can get embedded into the fascia, into the nervous system. The energetic particles of the trauma are literally staying in our body, bound and suppressed. And so by training neural load, which literally means training with Mace, and also we do staff fighting here in our teacher training. We have Coach Mark Wildman, who trains both women and men, a lot of times actresses on set, but just everyday clients as well, to have a staff. So let's say we're holding a staff, we're protecting ourselves, or pushing the staff up, and someone's actually striking the staff at our skull from all different angles. So when you have to close that neural pathway of protecting yourself, you have the opportunity to embody that in your physical vessel, and you remove all obstacles. So something happens where you have to get smart because there's a real threat coming in, and you have to make the best choice in a very short amount of time. So it puts you into flow state. It allows you to complete that neural loop. And it just empowers you to be able to protect yourself, which maybe if you would have had the ability to protect yourself when the initial traumatic event happened, and you would have acted in that way, it wouldn't be so suppressed in your body. So this is an opportunity to re-hardwire the nervous system for completing that loop. Training with Mace draws upon ancestral knowledge of using primitive tools for self-defense, protection, and reverses the effects of domestication. So many of our creature comforts in life, everything's automatic. We spend a lot of time on cell phones, chairs, devices, cars, even garage door openers. Everything's kind of automatic these days. So we've lost the need for tools. So as people start to develop their competency, their grip strength, their shoulder strength, their ability to move the mace through the air, even might apply to chopping wood or being able to build or doing some physical labor. This reverses the effects of domestication, which is really needed for feeling vibrant and for feeling competent as a human. We increase our reaction time, having to react in a response to real threat in a safe environment. So things like staff fighting. Again, this closes the neural loop for defense. And one of the key topics that we touch on in our neural load portion of the 100-hour Still Mace teacher training, which there's a few folks here that have done the steel mace or the neural loads, I might actually call upon you guys to give some feedback on that in just a moment. But we use the acronym, it's OODA loop. So OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. Does anybody care to share briefly their findings on training with staff? Ruby or Jackie or Wonder? How did it go? What'd you learn?
One thing I'll just quickly comment is it kind of, you're going for the head, you're swinging for the head. So you start slow and then you can pick up speed as you get comfortable. One really nice thing is that it's very visceral, and it's like you learn the patterns and then you're just doing it, repping it.
Cool, awesome. Anybody else from the teacher training want to chime in on the OODA loop, training that neural pathway of actual self-defense? Ruby or Jackie, have you guys done the neural load training yet?
I have not done the training, that specific training here yet, but I've done past self-defense training and training myself out of the habit of closing my eyes when there's something coming my way, and actually confronting the attack was really empowering.
Awesome, cool. And Jackie, have you done Mark's neural load course yet in the teacher training, or are you still working on that one? We just covered, most of the teachers had to cover it like a month ago, but I can't recall. Have you done it?
I didn't start it yet. I did see everybody kind of like learning how to defend themselves, just putting that stick up.
Sweet. Awesome. So anybody that's curious about training neural load, you can go to your Home Depot store. You can get we just literally get shovel handles, and they're 4.5 feet long sticks. And the moves are super simple. You block and you push away. Instead of the natural response in a fear, fight, or flight is to shrink in when somebody's attacking you. But we're training that ability to push away and angle the mace so that you're always protecting your skull, or angle the staff so that you're always protecting your skull. And then communicating with your practitioner, whoever's your partner, just making sure that as they're swinging the staff, that you guys are maintaining eye contact, that they're always protecting themselves, and just playing with different bases of support. So in our neural load training, we'll be first just doing it from a standing position where feet are planted. Then we'll start traveling. One person is approaching the person, one person's traveling back. Then we'll do lateral movement. Then we'll go down to one knee. We change the base of support, and we change the different directional the directions where the staff is coming from. So really fun drill, really empowering. Try it out. If you're doing the teacher training, you'll definitely get some practice with coaching that as well. All right, let's go into our breath, somatic breathing exercise for inducing parasympathetic nervous system and reducing sympathetic. So you can do this with your eyes closed. Lying on the ground is best so that you're flat on your back. So if you go out of the screen for a moment, totally fine. I'm going to walk you guys through it. And those of you guys watching at home, I can't tell if you're on your back, but feel free to repeat this. You'll get the video recording after this. I think it's good for like 7 days after. And this is a powerful, powerful exercise in getting your micro stressors or micro fight or flight responses to actually calm down and get grounded in your body. So the exercise is take 4 inhales and exhales through the nose. So you inhale and you exhale through the mouth pretty rapidly. Inhale through the nose. Exhale, this time make kind of an audible ha, like almost like a sigh. Ha. And then we'll start to engage the eye movements, but the breathing pattern is similar. It's an inhale and this like sigh of relief. Ha. All right, so the first eye placement, you can stretch your eyes all the way to the right as far as you can go and do 4 rounds of that inhalation, exhalation. Inhale, exhale, and really focus on straining the eyes as far as you can, just hard right, not up or down, just hard right. Relax your arms by your body, feel the body get heavy. Keep stretching the eyes, the nose points straight up. And after your 4th round of breath, slowly float the eyes to the center, look up to the ceiling. And relax into your body, feel the weight of gravity. Notice if things kind of blur or soften around where your eyes are focusing. And immediately move your eyes as far hard left as you can. 4 rounds of breath. Deep inhale through the nose. Exhale, sigh it out. Inhale. Exhale. Feel that vibration in the back of your throat. Deep inhale. If things come up mentally, feel free to just file those thoughts, file those emotions where they need to be filed. Deep exhale. Notice any nuances of where you're holding tension in your body. 1 more round. And a sigh out of the mouth. Return back to center. And then eyes pointed straight up and back. So look kind of towards the back of your head, back of your skull. Deep inhale through the nose. Pause. And deep exhale. Those of you guys just joining us, relying on our back, doing parasympathetic breathing, feel free to jump in when you're ready. We're stretching the eyeballs as far up and back as we can, while doing 4 inhales and exhales through nose and mouth. And again, after that 4th one, return back to center. And then trace the eyes straight down. If you're driving in a car, obviously you can't do this too well right now, but you can do it later on. 4 rounds of breath. Inhale. And exhale. Notice the heaviness in the belly, the body. Feel that sensation of gravity, surrendering to gravity into the ground, wherever your body is making contact. A couple more rounds of breath here. After you finish that 4th breath, come back to center. And they're pretty rapid breaths. The exercise is just getting the oxygen in and breathing and sighing it out, feeling the vocal cords vibrate. Take your eye gaze to the top left. So you're looking on a diagonal instead of hard left, you're going top left, 45 degrees. Keep tracing the eyes that way as much as you can. Do your 4 rounds of breath. Inhale. Sigh it out. Exhale. A few more times. Inhale. And exhale. Last 2. And return to center. And then top right diagonal. So instead of hard right, we're going 45 degrees up and right, stretching the eyes as far as they can in that direction. Deep inhale. And sigh it out. Exhale. 3 more rounds. Deep sigh on the exhale. Relax any areas that you're holding. See if you can identify any regions that are lacking oxygen and bring oxygen to that zone. Last round. And then slowly make your way back up to a seat. And we'll carry on with the workshop. And I highly recommend using that somatic exercise, completing the cycle. There would have been a down left and a down right. You can also trace the eyes in a circle while doing the 4 rounds of breath. And you would complete that cycle 2 times through and check the eyes, right and left eye, look in the mirror prior to doing round 1, then do a round, then do a 2nd round. And you're gonna see little nuances shift in your eyes, which are indicator of how stressed our nervous system is. Okay, so now that you're nice and focused, we're going to go into the meat of how the components of the Steel Mace Vinyasa or Kinesiolyoga elements and how to relate that to somatics. So our 3 components of Steel Mace Vinyasa and Kinesiolyoga, they are interchangeable. The system started with Kinesiolyoga and then it evolved into Steel Mace. And the foundations are found in Kinesiolyoga. It's just easier exercises. Steel Mace is more complex because there's a lot more swinging. So we've got our prime, condition, and practice. I would have a page for each of these, maybe prime on one page or like divide the page into thirds. So the priming section is mobility and asana. So is prime, condition, and flow. I forgot the third part. So prime is mobility and asana. These are breathing postures, undulating, moving between poles. Our physiological goals in the prime section of a steel mace vinyasa practice are so just looking from a kinesiology lens, our goals are to increase temperature, make our fascia more pliable, increase ground substance, increase synovial fluid to the joints, map out our motor control patterns unloaded to increase the success under load, and to prime the degrees of freedom that will be trained in conditioning. It's okay if you didn't get all those. Come to teacher training, we hammer these down pretty well. And it's open to all levels, just as long as you have some semblance of a practice, we can interview you and see if it's a good fit for you. So we've got our physiological goals of that priming section, and then we have our somatic goals. So when reverse engineering our emotional patterns and using the movement practice to actually break out of those patterns, the somatic goals are here. We're bringing awareness to the sensations in the physical body that are energetically blocked, bound, restricted, or in a state of disease. So you guys all identified a physical area in your body or a pattern that's showing up physically. So next time you go to your movement practice, use the 20-minute mobility section as an opportunity to bring awareness to sensations that are energetically bound. Increase your parasympathetic breath work to increase sensation and start shifting these sensations to be more expansive, fluid, and moving. So if they are stuck, if they are restricted, this is an opportunity to put breath around them and get them moving. And then phase 3, allow yourself to feel to the fullest extent of the somatic sensation in your body that isn't serving you, and create a container to move that stagnant or trapped energy. So this is the preliminary work in a 60-minute class. Generally, the first 15 to 20 minutes are priming, joint mobility, and asana, and then we move into our next phase, condition. So possible mechanisms for that blockage or restriction. Why was the energetic center blocked? It could be an incomplete cycle of fight or flight or freeze from a traumatic event. It could be embedded belief systems arising from a prolonged pattern. Emotional protection from further pain or trauma. Wright classifies these as retraction resulting in armoring. Us in the fascial world or mobility world, anyone that's working with RAD Roller, we call it myofascial restrictions. We call it bound fascia. It results in dampened sensations, inflammation in the area, and potentially results in dysfunction of neighboring organs, joints, and muscles. So I'll go through systematically the 3 elements of a steel mace vinyasa class, and we'll open up for Q&A. So next phase, the second phase, we have our condition section. So these are timed protocols, learning movements from simple to complex. We have literally hundreds of exercises ranging from body weight exercises to club exercises to steel mace vinyasa complexes. They're all different categories derived from circular strength training. So it's a vast body of work that can be adapted for all populations. So that's why there's hundreds, is because there's always a level 1, level 2, level 3, and a progression from there. So these are timed protocols, learning from simple to complex. The purpose is to improve a sport-specific skill and tap into flow state. So our physiological goals are improving strength, coordination, balance, power, competence with tools, priming for a fighting scenario, potentially with a mace, priming the OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, and act pathway, which is essential for releasing trauma, building confidence, training functional movement patterns, increasing mobility. So learning how to stand better, learning how to live without pain. Our somatic goals. So we've got 2 lenses. We're looking at it from a physiological standpoint. That's the old school way. And now, as you guys are the new on the frontier of learning this in-depth method of mindset and movement coaching, somatic goals are to create a safe environment for moving bound energy, to increase focus and attention on the somatic experience in the body, to bring awareness and breath, and reconnect somatic experiencing to previously blocked or numb areas. So if an area is feeling extremely restricted, that conditioning section is an opportunity to bring prana and life force into that area and reverse the postural deviations and power leakages that have resulted from a prolonged emotional pattern or emotional state. So in our conditioning section, we always have 3 rounds. The first round, you just learn the exercises, no timer, and then we go into 2 timed rounds, or whatever the timing protocol is. We specialize in teaching people what energetic components are associated with different HIIT protocols, because some are really fast and some are more long endurance, and what emotional or what energetic systems you're tapping into using different protocols. So we've got our learning phase, our practice, and our performance phase. Possible mechanisms: as the posture shifts out of fight or flight formation into the more upright and strong posture, the emotional feelings or sensations can shift as well. The fight or flight phases of trauma response get to be completed, thus releasing suppressed emotions from the event. We have the opportunity to reprogram the nervous system to release the emotional pattern, and we can provide a pattern interrupt through the movement practice. So again, hang with me here. We've got our prime, we've got our condition. So we're 40 minutes into class. So we just completed our conditioning circuit, probably 45 minutes into class because we had to do that learning round. And now we finally built up to our flow round. This is loaded asana sequences and unloaded asana sequences. So first we do the yoga sequence with a load. We remove the load and we're flying and we're floating because we have that stored that contractile history of the load, and everything feels so much easier, and we're just literally floating off of our mat and getting into flow state. So we're working with load to solidify the skill of creating stability in transitions. The physiological goals are heightened proprioception, increased complexity, balance, strength, power, coordination, agility, and we're training the ability to tap into flow state for a prolonged amount of time. So as people get more proficient with training with flow shala systems or Steel Mace Vinyasa, generally they'll be able to get into flow state by minutes 12 and stay there from minutes 12 to 18 or 20 through the rest of the workout, the timed workout, and then through the entire flow. And they know how to add the complexity to stay in that hypofrontality, where we phase off the prefrontal cortex and we tap into other higher functioning centers of the brain. These are possible. Actually, we'll go into somatic goals. So somatic goals of the flow are to rewire the nervous system for progressive and incremental change, to imagine a new response. So basically mapping out what you'd like to do differently in the future. So tapping into imagination network, which is a higher functioning center of the brain or network in the brain, with giving yourself the myriad of opportunities or possibilities that exist that are going to be superior to the current pattern, to get creative with action steps for further empowering transformation. So taking that off of the mat as well. And the possible mechanisms for this are hypofrontality, phasing off the prefrontal cortex, like I said, turning on the higher functioning centers of the brain, learning to move from intuition, removing energetic blocks in the body, creating strength and stability in yoga asana, and developing that stamina, so that feeling of competence, embodying the inner warrior. And OODA loop primes the neural pathway for protection, vitality, and strength. So that is how the Steel Mace Vinyasa classes are structured, and we teach all different elements of that prime, condition, and flow in all the classes. You'll see that kind of interwoven in, and it's a very systematic way to get somebody to reverse their posture and power leakages so that they can start to take on emotional patterns that serve them. So the final things I'll touch on, the other 3 Ps, we talked about emotional patterns. The posture deviations, they're just deviations from neutral that might create various splits in the body. So our asymmetries can be examples of postural deviations. So maybe right side got overdeveloped and left side's kind of weaker. Or other examples of postural deviations would be pain, inflammation, fascial restrictions, being accident or injury prone, like having really careless accidents over a long period of time, or injuries, shoulders rounded forward, low back pain, neck forward, weak legs, weaker arms, collapsed chest, gripping of the toes, digging heels, flat glute areas. These are all examples of postural deviations that show up when certain emotional patterns are embedded for a long period of time. And then those postural deviations lead to certain things phasing off. Examples of power leakages are weak grip strength, no knowledge of deep inner core activation, inactive glutes, overactive quads and front line, extremely tight psoas, pain in the back and neck, bound fascia in mid back, resulting in limited thoracic range of motion. So those are just the starting points for taking this practice a little deeper. I'd love to open it up for Q&A for you guys. And if you don't have any questions, let's start with questions. Does anybody have any specific questions about the content covered in this workshop? And I love questions when they're just super direct, like ask me a direct question, I'll do my best to answer it.
When you have a blockage in your solar plex, what does that deviation move towards?
What is the power leakage associated with it?
Yeah.
So generally when somebody is blocked in their solar plexus, it can lead to like low back pain. It could lead to poor posture or poor core activation in a workout. And then it can also affect all of the different organs that are associated in that region. And if anyone has to leave, it is 5. We're gonna do about 5 minutes of Q&A. Feel free to head out. You guys do get the link to the Steel Mace Vinyasa class that's happening at 5:30. So feel free to check your email, click on that link. You'll get the recording of it as well. So highly recommend, just now that you know the background of what a Steel Mace Vinyasa practice is, Xander has programmed it for you guys attending the workshop. And if you have the time to hang out, just chat with me and we can ask further questions. Any other questions pertaining to the content we just covered? Any takeaways, things that you learned, aha moments?
I actually have a question about speech.
Mm-hmm.
So when you spoke about how to gain mastery of your vessel,
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'm wondering about is how that, if that ties to speech. Like I would really love to be able to speak clearly and authoritatively and without ums or uhs or likes and uncertainties.
Sure. Absolutely. So one of the components of the Steel Mace Vinyasa 100 hour is that we have our coaches do what are called coaching teachbacks at Movement Lab. So every weekend we are coaching you guys in removing the ums, the ahs, because part of that transition and self-evolution is being able to master the voice. And so even people that aren't planning to do this as a profession or coaching, we find that when people can articulate and speak what's going on in the physical body, that it helps them make a deeper connection on a kinesthetic level, physiological and somatic level. So it just takes practice and a container to be able to get that skill developed, but it's very developable.
Quick question, is Body Minds the one by Ken Dickwald?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Questions, takeaways?
And there's a question in the chat.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Any other questions for verbal people that want to share?
Yeah, too. You mentioned something on somatic, a book on somatic coaching earlier on. Who was that by?
I'll have to reference my audio, like it's on my audiobooks. I don't know offhand, but if you just type in somatic coaching to Audible, it will come up as the main title. You can shoot me an email and cross-reference too.
Perfect.
Andrea had a good question. The labels associated with variations of breath I mentioned, are those simply proprietary means of differentiating diaphragmatic activation, or are the names physiological driven? So the 5 levels of breath were derived from Scott Sonnen's work, who I study with for many years. And they are just a scale of breathing that helps with training this specific type of movement. So when we're teaching people to work with clubs or with body weight even, this is a very simple scale that just allows you to apply it to like layman's terms. But yes, there's a lot of diaphragmatic activation happening with that forceful exhalation. And then she also says, do you know of any evidence-based resources that map the association of physical sensations of tension, psychological variations, motivation, activation, and various emotions? I would say the Body Mind book is a good starting point for that. And continuing to pursue Wilhelm Reich's work and listening to dissertations on that as well can really help tie in the missing pieces from a social level as well, and even political level of how some of these systems of cultural oppression have been implemented for a long period of time and that have actually impacted our attitudes and emotions too. Cool. Any other questions, feedback, or takeaways?
Question for you on the when you're working backwards from power leakage, so someone has weak grip, say, is it, I see how you could work forward from there's a pattern going on here, and here's the postural deviation, and there's how it manifests. When you're working backwards from the power leakage, are there multiple different possible deviations, I would think, that would create that power leakage potentially?
Generally with grip strength, not using leverage tools is a big culprit for that. So in traditional or conventional weight training, you're just making a hook with the fingers and you're just like holding the weight with the hook or holding the apparatus and hooking it. Whereas when you have to actually generate real torque and leverage with the Mace tool, your wrist, the entire kinetic chain of the forearm, the wrist, the shoulder girdle is getting connected. So you can teach people to improve their grip strength independently from them knowing about the emotional patterns. You can just create a system that's going to help them to not have as many power leakages. Even with people putting their hands fully on the ground, like making that full fascial connection with the entire hand. I teach people that the thumb is correlated with the thumb and pointer finger correlated with the front line and chest. Pinky finger correlated with the outer line, 2 middle fingers, rotator cuff. So if people are bubbling up or dumping weight into the wrists, we can help to identify that power leakage and help them seal that up so that they know the mind muscle connection with the reason behind it. So a lot of that content is covered in the teacher training and goes into depth in Movement Coaching 101 and Prime. All right. Well, thanks guys for staying after. It was a pleasure to hang out with you guys and geek out on somatics and flow state. If you're curious more about the program, book your call with me. If you want other support in other programs, we can direct you to the right one. And it's a pleasure to share this information. And I look forward to the next one. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.